Today, I'll be sharing 3 one-minute financial modeling tips that have saved me hundreds of hours in Excel work over the past years. I've worked on and reviewed more than 100 financial models over the past 5 years. Of all the tips and tricks I learned along the way, there are 3 that have probably saved me the biggest amount of time. Those tips don't require any additional tools and they only take a minute to set up. But once you've implemented them, they'll be saving you time for years to come. Tip number 1 is all about structuring your spreadsheets in Excel. There have been so many times where I had to review a model that somebody else prepared and I would be completely lost when I opened their file. It would be impossible to make sense of how things are structured and what goes where in order to arrive at the end result. And I've personally been there. My first models are embarrassing, to be honest. And I had so many times where I had to spend hours explaining to someone how my models work and how they're structured, that over time, I started leaning towards having a similar structure throughout all my models, which ensures that if someone has reviewed one spreadsheet, they can review all of my spreadsheets without me having to explain every time. What I have open here is the final version of the model that we're building throughout my free course. It's available on YouTube and it's all about creating a 5-year strategic, dynamic, assumptions-driven financial model for use with lenders or investors. What you can notice here is that each tab, each sheet has the same structure at the top. So I have a link to my table of contents, I have the title, I have the entities that this relates to, and also the presentation currency. And if we go to the modeling tabs, you see that even my headers here are exactly the same, and even the year corresponds to the same columns. This makes it much easier when you're preparing consolidation views, for example. You can go in formula and see that everything is linking to the same column, which is a nice way to double check that everything is linked correctly. Having those header sections for each of your worksheets allows you to easily prepare a table of contents, for example, and at the same time, it increases the perceived value of your model because it's a really simple tweak that actually makes your models look much more professional and much better structured in the eyes of a stakeholder that's looking at them or reviewing them. On one hand, this means that you can charge more for your models because they have this perceived higher value. And on the other hand, it takes you less time to explain how the model works to the people that you're building it for. In a minute, I'll tell you about the third tip, which is really surprising because it has nothing to do with Excel. But before that, tip number 2 is always document your model logic. I can't tell you how many times I've had to explain things that for me are simple to someone else. And it's really easy to get into the trap of thinking that your model logic is simple because after all, you're the one that thought it out, that put it together. But for other people, it can be really complex to understand what's going on. So documenting your model logic, again, saves you time in explaining how your model works. Now look at this piece of my model. This is the worksheet where I'm modeling the corporate entity for our future consolidation. And I have here some assumptions, different drivers, debt schedules, cash conversion cycles, things like that. Then I have the income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, and everything works just fine. But imagine that you have to go in and understand how everything works, how all the formulas are linked. And this is not even a complex model on its own. It's pretty straightforward and quite simple. But something that you can do that would only add you seconds for each line is having this notes column here. And you see here that just by glancing at it, I know how things are modeled. So I don't need to go into this formula, see that the average is taking the previous 3 to figure out that I'm modeling all the operating expenses as percentage of operating expenses, but also forecasting it as a moving average of the last 3 periods. And I do that for every row that calculates something or that is an input. I do that on the side, and this makes it so much easier for other stakeholders to open the model and quickly get up to speed, quickly understand what's going on. And there's another huge benefit to that. At the same time, something that's happened even more is I've had a lot of times where 3 months, 6 months down the line, a company would reach out and tell me, okay, we're doing another round, we want to update the model or something like that. And I can't tell you how many hours I've spent staring at an Excel file, having trouble believing that I'm the one that built this Excel model. We always think that just because right now we're in the moment and it all makes sense, that it would always make sense. But just a few months down the line, when you've worked on other projects, it's so hard to remember what you did, why you did it that way, and how everything flows together. So having short notes whenever your model logic is a bit more advanced makes a world of difference. Before, when I was updating an old model, it would take me half a day to just go through everything and figure out how it works. But now that I'm documenting my model logic every time, it takes me minutes to get back up to speed with the model. My third and final tip is something that actually happens before you even open Excel, before you start working. Just take a minute to draw out a flowchart. You can just scribble it out on a piece of paper, or if you plan to present it, you can put it in PowerPoint or something like that. But just having this simple structure with all the model pieces and how the logic flows between them makes so much difference and saves you so much time when you start building your model. I've had so many cases where I would go in, start building a piece of the model logic, make it really amazing. And I know most people find it hard to get excited about Excel models, but I do. But yeah, back to the story. And then I would start working on the next piece, and I'll figure out that I needed to do something differently in the first model piece because I needed to connect to the second piece, and I'll have to go back, rework a part. And this leads to more issues because when you're working on a piece of your model, you're focused on this piece. And when you have to go back and make a slight change, your mind will be preoccupied with what you're working on right now. So it's much easier to make mistakes and to have to spend a lot more time figuring out what happened. But having a flowchart outlining how all your model pieces work together makes such a huge difference. And it doesn't have to be like extremely detailed. It can just be a few blocks representing your different worksheets and some arrows pointing the data connections between those. What I have here is a simple, like a flowchart. I have the balance sheet, what makes up the balance sheet. I have the income statement, what makes up the income statement in terms of additional schedules. Then I also have different interconnections. So for example, the sales would inform accounts receivable, which have to do with the balance sheet. The property, plant, and equipment, it would go into the balance sheet, but the depreciation would go into the income statement. Same way, debt would be on the balance sheet, but the interest on this debt would be in the income statement. And then those two combined give us the cash flow statement. I input scenarios, and then I have the model outputs based off of the balance sheet, the income statement, the cash flow statement combined with the scenarios. Also, whenever I'm presenting the model, have the financial model structure, the different entities that come up with the core business view. Then you have different additional pieces, acquisitions, new products, eliminations between the subsidiaries, and you arrive at the consolidated view. And from the consolidated view, we can prepare different outputs, and we'll also be using different config sheets to inform those outputs. I've been using those 3 tips for years now, and they have saved me so much time. It's sometimes even hard to comprehend. I really suggest you go in, implement those, and give them a try. And I'm pretty sure you'll be amazed at the results. And if you're into Excel modeling and want to learn more, you should check out my free course on creating 5-year dynamic assumptions-driven financial models in Excel, where I take you from a blank Excel page all the way to the model that we looked at in this video. It's free and published on YouTube, and you can take a look here. Thanks for watching. See you next week.